Hi, my name is Alan Pollock and I'm going to read you my story, The Bear Who Went to War, which is the story of a real bear who thought he was a man, joined the army, won a medal, and then went to live in Edinburgh Zoo. When I was first told the story by a very old lady, I didn't believe it. If you don't believe it, you can look up online about a bear called Wojciech, the soldier bear, and see lots of great pictures of him with his friends. My story, with amazing pictures by Bryony Thomson, is for 4 to 6 year olds. The Bear Who Went to War. High up in the mountains, a hungry shepherd boy found a tiny brown bear abandoned by hunters. So here you can see the soldiers. The boy has no food, so he swaps the little bear for a hunk of bread. Now here's the soldiers sneaking him into camp. The last thing the sergeant wants is another mouth to feed. The soldiers were travelling far from home. They loved the little bear and kept him out of sight until, one night, Peter, who'd been feeding him drops of water from a bottle, crept on tiptoes to get a hunk of bread and found himself nose to nose with the sergeant. "Well," mumbled Peter sheepishly, "where would you rather he was? Inside the camp looking out, or outside the camp looking in?" Soon the little bear began to grow and grow and grow. Peter, whose family lived far away, couldn't wait to tell his daughter about the new recruit with the silky hair, the long nose, the shiny claws, who ate and slept each night curled up at Peter's feet. "I'm going to call you Wojciech," said Peter, the little warrior. One day a stranger crept up and hid inside the camp. He wanted to spy on the soldiers, find out how many troops they had, how many trucks, if they had a secret weapon. The general was pleased that Wojciech had chased the stranger away and gave him a jar of his very special homemade raspberry jam. Soon it was time to move. The general smiled. "Soldiers only from now on." "What?" said the bugle boy. "You heard him," screamed the sergeant. Big Frankie, the gunner, stepped up. "He goes, or we stay." The general's mouth flapped open. The glass popped out of his eye. Everyone fell silent. "Perhaps there's another way," stammered Peter. "Private 40961 Wojciech," Peter said, "reporting for duty." Once ashore, word of Wojciech soon spread far and wide. Crowds gathered to wonder at the extraordinary new recruit, with the long nose, the silky coat, and claws now sharp as knives. The bear loved the men loved Wojciech like a brother. They would rather have died than let their friend come to harm. And when the soldiers rested, they wrote home about the gentle giant who wandered further and further from their side, even as the enemy drew near. When the time for battle came, Wojciech stood firm. The soldiers gasped as Wojciech, Private 40961, bent, turned, passed and watched the muzzle flash, then followed the company through the smoke to the top of the hill, where they planted a flag at the summit. The band of brothers rested. Wojciech was a hero. The general dug deep into his pack and presented Wojciech with a reward, his last 2 jars of jam. Peter asked the general when they'd be home. By harvest, Halloween, or Christmas? "Not home," said the general. "Scotland." "Scotland!" shouted the men. "The enemy's still in our towns and on our fields and farms. We must bide our time abroad." "And Wojciech?" asked Peter. "Wojciech comes with us," said the general. The men smiled. In Scotland, the mayor welcomed the soldiers to his town. Some people laughed. Some people wished the strangers would go home. Some were kind and offered the soldiers work. But Wojciech made friends wherever he went. The people loved the bear loved the people. They showered the big brown beast with buns and sweets and his favourite, raspberry jam. But as autumn turned to winter, Peter grew sad. He longed for news of Anna, his wife, and Eva, his daughter, back home on the farm. So one day, bright and early, he left the little town where they were camped and set off for the city to ask the people there if they had news. Peter had never left Wojciech. Wojciech had never been without Peter, not for a single moment. Wojciech waited and waited. 2 weeks went by and still no news. Then one day Wojciech heard the voice he loved. Peter! He bounded up. Let go, you big dafty, let go. For a moment Peter thought that Wojciech might choke him. The men's wives and children were safe and on a ship to join them. Big Frankie danced a Highland fling. The general clapped. Even the sergeant smiled. But then Peter saw that Wojciech was sad. What's the matter? Asked Peter. What's the matter, old friend? Then he understood. Don't worry, Peter said. Don't you worry. We haven't forgotten you. In Edinburgh, the people gave a party, the biggest party of the soldiers' lives. There were toys and games, music, dancing, song. The soldiers wept with joy to see their wives, and the children waited in turn to visit the hero with the big nose, the silky coat, and the shiniest claws in the world, who loved Peter like a friend and saved the soldiers' lives at Monte Cassino. I'll never forget you, said Peter, and he didn't. Each day he visited his friend in his little house in the zoo and brought him buns, honey, and his favourite, raspberry jam. Well, said Peter, what are comrades for? So here you can see a picture of the real bear, Wojciech, a Persian brown bear who was adopted by the artillery division of General Anders' 2nd Polish Army. He carried artillery shells at the Battle of Monte Cassino and arrived in Scotland as a refugee in 1946, found a home in Edinburgh Zoo, and is commemorated by a statue in Princes Street Gardens.